Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, everything you wanted to know about online learning, but were afraid to ask. We have with us tonight several staff members from the Online Writing Center who are going to walk you through the webinar. Before we get started, first, I do want to apologize very quickly for the technical difficulties, and thank you for hanging on the line while we figured that out. One thing we're learning right now about this huge transition to online learning is that it is putting a huge demand on all of the systems that we're using. So we are having some slowdown with things like GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar. You might notice that as you're logging in, things are taking a lot longer. Just be patient, that will get better over time. But right now, just keep in mind, all of these things are suddenly being flooded with a lot more users than typically we are used to seeing join. So again, I appreciate you hanging in there. Tonight's session is going to be a bit more formal than we would normally have for one of our webinars. We don't really have a slide deck to go through. Rather, we really want this to be an audience-driven conversation or dialogue about what it is that you would like to know, what you might be nervous about, anxious about when it comes to learning online. And we are also going to have the specialists, the folks who we have on the line tonight, walk us through some particular topics that we know can be sticking points for students as they're just transitioning into online learning. So on the line with me tonight is Dr. Samara Rasmussen, who is our dissertation writing specialist here at the online campus for our Online Writing Center. We also have Gabrielle Lynch, who is our writing specialist, as well as our multilingual and international student specialist. And finally, finally, Stephanie Beckman, who's a peer tutor as well as a PhD student in our online IP program. So thank you to the three of you for joining. And again, thank you for those of you who are listening and for coming in this evening to join us. So the three topics that we're going to talk about this evening are engaging in a virtual classroom. So I don't necessarily like the words best practices. I like something more like tips and behaviors for how you're going to make the most of engaging in that virtual classroom, whether it's in an asynchronous or synchronous manner. We're also going to talk about some really good behaviors and tips for receiving feedback. So this might be one of the first times that you've received feedback in asynchronous, so via email or in a discussion board or so forth, where you're not face to face with your peers. It might be feedback from your peers, feedback from your instructor, but you're not there seeing them. So we've taken away that visual, the body language, and so how we can adjust to that. And then finally, we want to talk about staying connected and that importance of making sure that you are reaching out, feeling like you're connected to your classmates, to your faculty, but also to everyone at the institution, and knowing that there are a lot of people. We might not be physically present on campus, but we are here to support and to help all of the students. So let's start with our first topic. And Samara, if you don't mind, I'm going to turn to you first. If you want to talk to us a little bit about what tips you have for students with regards to engaging in the classroom. I know that you've served as one of our embedded specialists in classrooms, so have you worked a fair amount with students in their Canvas classrooms?
Absolutely, and thank you. So there are two things that I was thinking about for how to fully engage and to make your asynchronous or your online classroom much more interesting and viable. And the number one thing is in discussions, which are they're relatively static. A prompt is given and then everybody responds and then people respond to responses, and there's supposed to be some sort of conversation happening. So one thing that I've seen both as an instructor and as a student, when students are responding to posts, they're asking the questions they might ordinarily ask in a classroom when you're having that face-to-face discussion. And when that happens and you can get some back and forth going, people asking more questions or providing different viewpoints, that makes that discussion much more rich and much more robust. And then I think the other piece of advice I would offer to students is if you have a question, if something is sort of sticking with you and you're thinking about it and you have a question, to ask it. Just create a new discussion or put it out there in a chat, but ask that question, because if you have the question, probably somebody else does. And and asking that question does a lot of things. It engages everybody, it puts things out there, but it also connects people to you. They see you as open and willing to start a conversation.
Great, thank you, Samara. Stephanie, let's turn to you from the student perspective. What do you think are some really critical things to keep in mind as when it comes to engaging in that classroom?
So kind of going back a little bit to thinking about, well, I guess maybe this is a little bit more related to the receiving feedback, but also in terms of the engagement piece. When you're writing to your peers, remember that they don't get to hear your voice and see your body language. So you want to be mindful of the way you express yourself to make sure that you are inviting further discussion and you are engaging with your classmates in an uplifting and engaging way. Because sometimes, especially when we're in a hurry and we're busy and we just fire something off in a discussion, depending on how that other person reads it and receives it, it can create some misunderstanding or some miscommunication. So first of all, selecting your words carefully. Another thing that comes to mind is building relationships. So whether you're building relationships with your instructor or building relationships with your classmates, it's a little bit different than when you're face-to-face, but with your instructor, make sure that you, as Dr. Rasmussen said, are asking questions and making sure that you're communicating with them, either by email or by chat if you have questions or concerns. And then in terms of your classmates, just because you can't see each other face-to-face doesn't mean you can't still have a community. And so of course you're going to engage in the discussion in the classroom, but you can also take those discussions outside of the classroom as well in terms of developing relationships. And those can really be a supportive way for you to move through the next term and to have lasting relationships beyond your program.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. And Gabrielle, anything to add as far as when it comes to engaging in a virtual classroom?
I think one of the most underutilized features, especially in terms of feedback, is the comments in our SpeedGrader function. So Canvas is unique in that you can almost have a full conversation with attachments in your SpeedGrader area for your writing assignments. So if you have a concern about something in your assignment, or the deadline, or the content, or a question after you submitted, that's a great place to go ahead and add that comment. Your instructor is very likely to see it since they have to upload their feedback to you there and to put the grade in. So it's sort of like an enhanced visibility option to see if you can get a little more feedback or clarifications on an assignment. Say the grade didn't go the way you expected it to. It can be a nice place to add that kind of comment there.
Yeah, and I want to add to that too, is that when you have that comment thread going in SpeedGrader, it's alerting you on multiple platforms as well. So it's going to be alerting you within Canvas, but also it'll kick you an email that says, your instructor left a comment for you on this particular assignment. So yeah, I agree, Gabrielle, that that's a really great tool to be using and a good way to interact with the instructor as well.
Can I hop back in for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so one thing that I've noticed both as a student and as a TA, because I TA sometimes in classes, it kind of goes back to that grading engagement, is that some students aren't aware that their instructors are leaving them feedback. So I want to make you all aware that Canvas has a bunch of really cool tools where your instructors can leave you feedback in a variety of ways. So sometimes they're actually marking up your document within Canvas where there are little bubbles that kind of either comment on the content or the grammar or APA of your papers. But there are also rubrics, and there are also there's kind of like a general assignment box. So don't just look at the grade that you get. Your teachers and or TAs put a lot of time into offering you detailed feedback, and it's for the purposes of helping you learn and grow. So be aware that it's there, and if you're not seeing it or if you can't find it, talk to your teacher so that they can help guide you to where you can find it, or reach out to your campus for help in terms of getting that feedback, because it is there, but a lot of people don't realize it, and then they keep getting the same grades over and over and not improving if they're not actually accessing and benefiting from that feedback.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I love that we've sort of just naturally transitioned into this conversation about feedback. I do want to pause because I know we're going to get the four of us are really heavily invested in this topic of feedback to students. I just want to remind those of you who are on the line, you can feel free to pop a question in at any point. I am keeping an eye on those questions. So if you have a question about anything that we're talking about, or really just anything at all, and it's on your mind, feel free to type it in and we'll definitely get to that question. Yeah, Stephanie, I think that that's a really great point. I was actually at a residency for some of our online PhD students not too long ago, and I just had the room, there was maybe about 20 students in the room, and I just asked them to raise their hand if they regularly viewed the feedback from their instructor, whether it be in SpeedGrader or if it was being returned to them in a Microsoft Word document. And, you know, it was maybe about a third of the room raised their hand as being dedicated to looking at that feedback regularly. A number of students said, well, if I get a good grade, I don't really look at it. And I think that that can be where we lose students, and where students are missing out on that feedback is if they look at their grade and they say, well, that looks good enough to me. And then they don't dive into that feedback. So, you know, just remember your instructors for the most part, particularly if you have a TA or someone from the Writing Center embedded in your class, or you're using the Writing Center, just remember that we've spent a lot of time on that feedback, and we've given it to you with the intention of really helping you to improve, making sure that as you progress through each assignment, you are able to apply that feedback and get better and better at it. So don't use the grade itself as a litmus test as to whether or not you want to read that feedback. Samara or Gabrielle, anything to add about that feedback process?
Yeah, this is Samara, and you really said everything I was going to say. However, I wanted to reiterate, I think it was Stephanie's point, that the instructors, the TAs, the embedded tutors, those of us who meet or have appointments with students in the Writing Center, we do make an investment in that feedback to provide help, because we do want you to improve your skills and practice your skills and be able to convey all the wonderful information that you have in writing. You may be writing in the rest of your career, and that feedback that we're trying to help you is not at all punitive. It's really about growth. And I think the flip side is for students to try to start receiving all that feedback with, first of all, positive intent, you know, understanding that the feedback is coming from a place of teaching and support and mentorship. So that positive intent is really about helping and not making anybody feel bad that they might have to practice a skill.
Mm-hmm. So thank you.
This is Gabrielle. I think that a big way to use feedback intelligently, especially if you did get a good grade, is to look through and find any thematic errors that you might have, which is something that repeats over and over again. So for example, while it might not have been a big deal on a 5-page paper, if you've got the same error going, you know, at the same rate in a smaller paper or even a larger paper, now we're adding up on that error. So if you had a 2-page paper and there was a couple errors your instructor let slide in terms of grading, that's going to add up the next time that you write a paper that's a little bit longer. So when you see grammar errors, a great strategy for integrating that feedback is to control all search, for example, right? So if you got a comment about fanboy commas, that's something you could search if you took a second to hit Control A and look for and, right? Or look for commas if you've used too many. That way you can start to sort of see the pattern in your own writing and notice, you know, where you're making that error and be able to revise in the future assignments.
On a related note, this is Stephanie, just hopping back in. You know, I think your kind of first line of questions, if you're having trouble interpreting your feedback or understanding your feedback, is of course your instructor, whoever gave the feedback to you. But I think another really powerful tool that I've seen students do is maybe they turn in an assignment and they don't get the grade that they want on that assignment. And then, you know, they come to us at the Writing Center. So whether you go to your campus Writing Center or through the online Writing Center, you know, they might say, hey, look, I got this back from a teacher. I didn't get the grade that I wanted. They said I had issues with X, Y, or Z. Can you give me some feedback? Because maybe the instructor, you didn't go in as much depth as you'd like, or maybe they just commented on what the problem was, but they didn't tell you how to fix it. So definitely benefit from the resources that your campus and that the entire Chicago school has to offer, because when a teacher is grading umpteen papers in a week, they might not have the time to give that really detailed individual support that a writing specialist that we can. So definitely use the tools that you have available to you.
Yeah, it's a really great point, Stephanie. Thank you. All right, well, let's talk about staying connected, because I think that this is critical. It's going to be especially critical now as we have, for students who are used to seeing their instructors, their peers face to face, to suddenly not have that, I think can be really difficult. But I think it's really important too, even for any audience members who might already be online students, to just remember that it's really important to take the steps to stay connected, to put some effort and some work into that, because it's really going to enhance your experience as a student, that if you feel a true sense of community and connection to your classmates, your faculty, as well as all of the staff here at the Chicago School. One thing that we have been working on, one is we have on our new website, which we'll bring up in just a minute, we have a blog. So we're going to be working on really our part, connecting, reaching out to students and trying to connect in that way. Obviously, we're offering webinars where students can come and engage in real time and or listen to that after the fact and feel that connection. We're also available via email. Gabrielle's been working on a texting function so that we can communicate really quickly with students via text. So there's a lot of options out there, but for my panel, and maybe Stephanie, particularly you, as from the student perspective, what advice do you have about staying connected?
I feel like I have a pretty huge list, so if I get too long, please stop me. So thinking about it first at the kind of local level in terms of connecting with your peers and your instructor, one of the tools that I found really helpful right out of the gate is in my first term as an online student, my classmates and I formed a WhatsApp group. So if you're not familiar with WhatsApp, it's just like a mobile chat where you can text or send images or GIFs or other things like that. And at first it was really a tool in terms of understanding assignments or talking about deadlines or collaborating in terms of residencies and things like that. But it eventually turned into like a friends group, a support group. So if somebody was going through a tough time, we were all there for them. Or if we're just like showing cute pet pics or cute kid pics or whatever, it kind of became twofold in terms of the meaning for that. And then in terms of connecting with your instructors, your online instructors want to connect with you just as much as your face-to-face typical instructors do. So, a lot of times it's like easy to feel like we're completely isolated and completely separated. But your teachers who are used to teaching face-to-face are going to be feeling that too. They're going to be feeling like, whoa, this is really different. So, schedule times to talk with them if you have questions about their class, or if you're working on your thesis or your dissertation and you're looking for somebody to kick ideas around with, schedule an appointment with your teachers. And it could be somebody you have a class with now, or it could be somebody you've had a class with in the past, but don't hesitate to reach out, because a big part of what teachers do is to spend time, working with students one-on-one, either on a phone call or in a GoToMeeting. I guess in terms of like kind of bigger picture connection, there's a lot of opportunities to connect with different communities. For example, using LinkedIn to connect with either graduates of your program or with your instructors or mentors, or ResearchGate to follow people who are doing things that are interesting to you in terms of your research. So don't feel like just because you aren't sitting in a classroom that you're not going to be able to follow people's work and connect with people on a deeper level.
That's really great advice, Stephanie. Thank you. Gabrielle or Samara, anything to add as far as staying connected?
I think really paying attention to your instructor syllabus is important. If they tell you this is the way you can reach me, don't try email. If it's not email, for example, if they're like, use the Canvas functions to contact me, make sure if they've indicated a preference on how to talk to you, that you're using that preference. That's usually found in the syllabus or in their initial announcement videos, for example. So the first thing that you can do to make sure you have the option of staying connected is double check which way they'd like you to talk to them.
Great, thank you. Samara, any final words on staying connected?
I think the main thing, especially from sort of the instructor, mentor role, is really to make sure that you're reaching out. But it should be authentic, right? You don't want to reach, it's just like in the classroom. You wouldn't reach out just to try to be in somebody's, eyesight all the time. You'd reach out authentically for support, for help, to ask questions. And once that starts to happen, and the instructor will reach back to you as well. And it may, the other thing that happens is that people then start reaching out to each other. They connect. The instructor may say, oh, Susie, did you know that Johnny also had the same question? And I thought maybe the two of you could talk or dig into that a little more. So that's how the networking can grow and draw people again back into that classroom and back into the cohort.
That's great, thank you. So I do want to just sort of close it out by, reminding you we are here, just, related, connected to this topic of connection. We're here. So contact us if you have questions. We are online writing center at the chicagoschool.edu. If you have not yet visited our website, strongly recommend that you do that. I'll pop over and give a quick tour of that in just a moment. I do still have my question box open. So those of you on the line, feel free to pop in a question. If you're listening in, feel free to email us your questions at onlinewritingcenter@thechicagoschool.edu. I do want to take a moment also to thank, while I'm bringing us over to the website, to thank Dr. Rasmussen, Gabrielle, and Stephanie for being on with us this evening and providing your insights on these topics of working and learning online. So here's our website. We have a main menu here on our landing page. The things I really want to point out, one, our webinars and workshops. So here is where you are going to find all of our upcoming webinars for the remainder of the spring semester. We also have resources for the APA 7th guide. So if you're making that transition, in addition to transitioning to online learning, transitioning over to the 7th edition APA manual, we have content for that there. We also have some content on plagiarism prevention. And then finally, some tips here for much of what we talked about tonight, but for learning online. So a lot of what we covered here is also on our website. We link out to a lot of the tools that you might be using as you go through this process. And then finally, the blog that I mentioned earlier. Here you're going to find Stephanie has had some really great insight for us. She's also put together a blog on her top 5 tips for learning online. So you can find that here. Preparing to be on webcam, and we'll continue to add to this again in the coming days and weeks. So again, thank you to everyone who joined, and please do reach out if you have any questions as you go along.